Today we're going to go through the whole second chapter, which some people might say, why are you doing the whole chapter? There's two different sections in this. There's a thing where there's a wedding and changing water to wine. There's also a cleansing of the temple. I believe they're very much related because of the way John puts this out. We've got some stone jars. We've got a stone temple. They're all for purification. So they all kind of go together. We're going to walk through this together. So if you got a Bible, I'm going to ask you to open up in your Bible to John chapter 2. And we'll throw it up on your screen. And you can kind of follow along with this as well. I hope you're ready to do some studying this morning. I hope you're ready to dive in and see what John wants to teach us through the Holy Spirit. All right. All right. It says, on the third day, this is verse 1, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Let's just stop right there, all right? We got a long way, didn't we? Got pretty far. Got all the way on the third. When you hear on the third day, does that remind you of anything at all? The third day is kind of a big thing. Whenever you hear the third day, we are automatically transported to the resurrection of Jesus. He was resurrected on the third day. So what we're finding here is at the very beginning of the Gospel of John, in chapter 2, at the very beginning, he starts with on the third day. And at the very end of John, he's going to be resurrected. He's going to talk about the third day. You should put bookmarks on both ends of this because they're both important. He's starting his ministry here on the third day. And it says, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Okay? So there's a wedding. You like weddings? I'm pro-wedding. All right, I've been to quite a few weddings. I've actually officiated probably more weddings than I can count. And I've done some really wacky weddings. I had one, I'll tell you this, when I did this one wedding, these people, I don't know what they were bizarre, man. This guy worked in the film industry, and I remember it was time for the rings. And I said, "May I have the rings?" And he reaches into a pocket and pulls out a severed finger with a ring on it. It was a prop for a movie. I was like, "What kind of sick dude are you? What you doing, right? What kind of wedding is this, right?" I mean, I had one where the bride, it was a Filipino wedding, and her veil got stuck in a thing and ripped her back. But I had one where I had the best man who died a couple of days before the wedding, and the maid of honor actually fell and busted her head open and was taken to the emergency room on the day of the wedding. I've had just all kinds of crazy things. This wedding was not like that. This seemed like a pretty good wedding, but there is a tragedy that happens in this wedding. You're running out of wine. Running out of wine, you may think that's not a big deal if you're not a wine drinker. Big deal in first century. In first century Israel, this is humongous. The wedding is paid for by the groom. It's not like here where you know, if you have daughters, you have the unfortunate or maybe fortunate. I don't know how you feel about it, but you're like, boy, this is going to cost me a lot one day. Some of you got several daughters, and you're like, man, we'll have to mortgage the house and get these kids married off, right? So you guys got one coming up, don't you? All right, good. We'll take a collection sometime. trying to hurt, man. It's tough, but the group paid for it this time. And if you weren't able to provide enough wine, that was a really big deal. Because it wasn't like there's a lot of other stuff here. They're not going to the movies, right, in Israel. There's not a lot of other entertainment. So a wedding is a really big deal. It's like the carnival came to town. I mean, it's a huge deal when there's a wedding. It's huge. It's entertaining. Instead of just sitting around like looking at your nails, you get to do something. And you go to a party and you're having fun and you're enjoying yourselves. And there's wine. And people are laughing. And Jesus, he starts his ministry. Here's what I love about Jesus. He starts his ministry at a party. He starts his ministry at a wedding. And I've heard all the arguments that people said, well, it wasn't real wine, it was grape juice. Listen, Welch's is not right. It wasn't grape juice. I mean, Welch's may want to propaganda to get you to do this. Well, grape juice came about in communion during Prohibition, okay? We always had, there was always wine, all right? So it's a little different. Here's the deal. It was wine. It was a party. They were enjoying themselves. And we know that right here because as we read the story, we find out later that the master of ceremonies, the MC, so to speak, the guy in charge, says, hey, most people bring out the good wine. They bring the good wine out at first, and then they bring out the really crappy wine later, right? The stuff that has no taste, right? The stuff that nobody likes. You bring that out after everybody's a little bit half snookered, right? and they can't taste it anyway. That's the point that he's making here. So it's a party, and Jesus shows up, and he's having a great time. And I think about this a little bit from Mary's perspective. Weddings are kind of aren't weddings kind of a coming of age event a little bit? You know, you got kids and they graduate, and they graduate from high school. That's a coming of age event, and everybody makes a big deal and they have a party for that, right? And because you've reached that point in your life where now you've graduated, and then you move out, right? Or you go to college, but then the next really big thing is that you get married, right? You get married, and that's a big coming of age moment. And then maybe after that, and so there's no coming back from that, right? You jumped into that, there's no coming back. So that you jumped into that, and it's coming, and then what's the next event? Maybe you have some kids, right? There's no coming back from that. I mean, you jumped into another level of adulthood, right? And another level of responsibility. And here we've got Mary at a wedding. You ever been some of you guys, you've been to a wedding with your mom, and you were single? I've been at a wedding with my mom when I was single. Before I was married, I remember going to my sister got married before I did, and there's other girls around, and my mom's just like itching at the bit. She's like, "Oh man, we gotta get this boy married, right? Let's hook this guy. He needs a woman, right? When are you gonna get married? When are you gonna get married? Well, you should get married. Why? Because I think you should get married. You make a great husband. Oh, you be the best husband. All this kind of stuff, because that's the way moms are." And so Mary's there with her son. Mary said, "I'm going somewhere with this. Believe me, trust me." You're like, "Where?" She's there with her son. And her son's 30. He's 30 years old. Like all his friends are probably married by now. Right? They're all off gone and they're married. They had this coming of age moment 10 years ago. Right? And Jesus is there and he's single and he's not married. And he doesn't have any kids. He's there with his mom, and everybody's kind of wondering, what's the deal with Jesus? What's the deal with him? But Mary knows that he has another coming of age moment. The question is, when is his hour going to come? Right? His brothers, maybe their hour came 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Or when's his hour going to come? Mary knows that his hour is not the hour he gets married. He's only got 3 years left to his life. And his hour is going to be his crucifixion. There's only 3 hours. There's only 3 years left. She doesn't know exactly how long, but his hour is different. He's a different cat. He's God Almighty, and Mary knows this. And his ministry hasn't started, and they're at a wedding, and it's this coming of age moment. And now it's about to start. It's all about to start. She's wondering, when is all that was prophesied about him going to start? When is he going to start being the Messiah? When is he going to start doing all this? He's been taking care of me since my husband died. Right? Mary's husband had passed away, and he's been taking care of me. And so as a general rule, when something goes wrong, she's always going to Jesus, because Jesus is the one that takes care of us. And here something goes wrong at the wedding. It says here, Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." And Jesus says something weird. He says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Okay, I don't know what your social skills are with your mom. Okay, but as a general rule, I can speak on behalf of a lot of moms. Don't call her woman. All right? I know that I shouldn't call my wife woman. If I come home and say, "Hey, woman," right? I'm getting bad looks now, right? "Hey, woman," right? No, is Jesus being rude to mom here? I want to explain to you what's happening here. Is that Mary is all of a sudden, she is getting involved now in something that's out of bounds for her. She is trying to start the ministry of Jesus, right? You can do a miracle here. You can do something. You can fix this. I don't know if she knew exactly what was going to happen, but it sure seems like it. And she's saying, she's pushing him to get involved in ministry and to start and to do it. And that is not up to her. That is not a mommy decision. That is a father decision. And so I'm not going to talk to you about this in a mommy relationship. This isn't a mommy issue. about whether my ministry of being the Messiah and doing ministry. This isn't a mommy-son issue. This is a father issue. So right now, woman, why are you involved in me? Why are you involving me? Why are you involved in this at all? This isn't about you and me. This isn't about the wedding. My ministry has to do with my Father. He dictates all this, and not you. He's lived with Mom a long time, right? And so there's a delineation happens here. He says, my hour has not yet come. And when he talks about his hour in the book of John, it's always talking about his crucifixion. It's going to see John has an agenda here. He's going to talk about his hour has not yet come. His hour has not yet come. His hour has not yet come. Throughout the book of John, read it. You're going to see my hour has not yet come. And then my hour is approaching. My hour is here. And it's all referring to that. Now, I'm going to share with you, in the Gospel of John, John has a very distinct way of doing this, of laying out the story. And you're going to see four things that happen in kind of succession, over and over and over throughout the first part of John. The first thing that you're going to see is you're going to be introduced in each story in the Gospel of John, in the first half of John, in the book of John, you're going to be introduced to a Jewish institution of some type. Okay? What's a Jewish institution? It could be like the temple. It could be ceremonial cleansing jars. It could be a sacred well. It could be a festival of Jesus, or a festival of the Old Testament. Some type of an Old Testament institution. It could be religious leaders, Pharisees. It could be something that's important to the Jews that they put a lot of stock in. It's important. He's going to introduce you to one of those in the Gospel of John. He's going to introduce you to two of them today. Once he introduces those to you, he's going to show you, and we're going to see in the story, that Jewish institution that's introduced to you is bankrupt. It's bankrupt. It has fallen. It doesn't fulfill its purpose. It isn't able to accomplish what the people of Israel think it should accomplish. It's bankrupt. And Jesus, we'll see this. And a lot of times it'll be in a physical way. We'll see this bankruptcy, this lack of fulfillment, this lack of being able to fulfill what it does. The next thing that will happen is that there will be some kind of misunderstanding. There's always misunderstanding throughout this, because the people, if we looked at John chapter 1, are in darkness. And so they're not going to see clearly what's happening. They're not going to see what Jesus is talking about when he says that this thing is corrupt or this thing is bankrupt, this thing doesn't fulfill its purpose. They're not going to understand what he's talking about, and they're going to misunderstand. And then Jesus is going to do over and over the same thing. He is going to replace that Jewish institution with himself. He's going to replace it with himself. I want you to watch this as we go through this, okay? Let's look at this way. What's happened so far? We've seen that there's a wedding. That itself is a Jewish institution, right? It's a wedding. But Jesus is not as concerned about the wedding per se as the jars that are involved here. It says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. That's a lot of water, right? I mean, you're talking about 200 pounds of water in these things. And we don't know exactly what they're being used for at this particular, the kind used for ceremonial washing. But the point is that Jesus brings into the story a Jewish institution. He brings into the story something that's used for Judaism. And these things are used for cleaning. They're used for washing. They're used for washing. I mean, if you got your Bible, you can, let me see. Why don't we turn to Mark chapter 7. You got a Bible, Mark chapter 7. And we'll look at verses 1 to 5. And see this is the quick draw. And Jesus is talking about what defiles people, what makes people unclean. Right? It says here in verse 1, it says, "The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed." You're like, oh, say it isn't so. They ate food and they didn't wash their hands first in a ceremonial way. When they come, The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing. That's what these big pots, these stone jars are for, that were seen at the wedding. Holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the traditions of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? In other words, everybody knows Jesus' disciples aren't doing the ceremonial washing like they're supposed to. Everybody's supposed to do the ceremonial washing, and Jesus' disciples, they don't go over and wash. They go over and they say, hey, is that what we need? Right? They don't do the ceremonial washing. And everybody's like, hey, how's come? And so that's what these things are for. This is for spiritual and physical cleansing. This is a ceremonial thing. So back to John. So it says, Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Okay. So first of all, there's 6 of these jars. 6 is a number in Judaism of incompletion. Okay. 7 is a number of wholeness. 6 is a number of incompletion. So we're already seeing that there's only 6 jars that we're talking about incompletion here, but they're not full. They're not full jars. They have to go and they have to fill these jars up. Are these jars that you drink from? No. Don't drink this. This is the water that you wash your feet in, that you wash your hands in. You don't drink this water, right? You put your hands in it, you do this, and you get done, but you don't drink it, right? There's some water that you drink. I remember going to Mexico and doing mission trips down there, or maybe South America, Guatemala, and you go down there, there's water that you bathe in, and there's water that you drink, right? They're not the same water, right? You get sick if you drink that other water. And Jesus says, fill these things with water. Not drinking water, just fill them with water, right? All right, well, we'll fill it up with water. Nobody knows what's going on here. And it says they filled them to the brim. They didn't just, it's not just a little bit. They fill these things to where they're overflowing with water. That's an important point that John wants us to see. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. Now the master of the banquet, there's a lot of debate over who this cat is. It looks to me like the master of the banquet is kind of like a cross between your best man and your like the person that plans your wedding, like your wedding planner. They're in charge of everything, making sure that everything is going well, all right? So he's in charge of making sure things are done right, that there's enough wine, everybody's getting enough food, everybody's happy, that things are in good shape. And so what they do is they take this wine. Now, Jesus hasn't drank any of it. This is really weird to me. If I was doing a wet miracle, now trust me, I'm not God. I haven't done no miracles, right? But if I was going to do one, it's my first time. Usually when I'm doing my first time, I want to test stuff out, right? Make sure that, oh boy, I've never done a miracle before. I wonder how this is going to fly in. I have to change up the water. Now it's wine. Just a second, let me just make sure it's good, right? It'll take a little bit. He didn't do that. He just says, fill them up. And he says, take it over to the guy in charge of the whole deal. And this guy doesn't know where this wine came from. He doesn't know where it is. And remember, people are a little snookered by this time. They've been drinking a long time. And so now you're kind of expecting this is your like C and D and E and F grade wine comes out, right? And they're like, oh, this is vintage 2020, right? You're like, all right, this is great. They take this wine, they give it to this guy. And then he says, they did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from. So we have a Jewish institution. We've got these ceremonial stone jars. Right? They're symbolizing the bankruptcy of the ceremonial washing and cleansing system that we have. The bankruptcy of that. And now there's a misunderstanding that comes because they don't know where this new wine comes from. He says he did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. What Jesus did here in Galilee, in Cana of Galilee, was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. And his disciples believed in him. So if we go through the steps of what happens, we see a Jewish institution. What is it? The ceremonial jars that are used for ceremonial cleansing, which, his disciples weren't doing. The Israelites were big on. The Jews. And the Jews are the enemies of God, right? They're the enemies of Jesus. They dislike Jesus, what is referred to here. Jews in general aren't enemies to Jesus, but in this book, these are talking about people that are attacking Jesus, all right? And they're saying, wait, why aren't you engaged in these practices? Why aren't you doing these ceremonial things? And Jesus is showing us with these empty jars that they're empty. And he says, you know what? Fill them to the brim, and I will make them overflow with new wine, with what really is good. What I give you is actually sufficient. What Israel gave you wasn't sufficient. What I'm giving you is sufficient. What I'm giving you is far greater than what you had before. As a matter of fact, what you had before was just an empty water, and it wasn't even good water. It wasn't even good for drinking. What I'm giving you is overflowing with wine. It is the best wine you ever tasted. The best wine you ever had. He's replacing an Old Testament institution with himself. He's saying, I am the fulfillment of what's bankrupt in Israel. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. After this, he went to Capernaum with his mother and brother and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover. Now, you see this all the time. It seems like every time Jesus shows up in Jerusalem, it's either Passover or it's a Sabbath. It just seems like every time he shows up, it's one of those days because there's all kinds of rules and the Jews are mad all the time and there's all kinds of stuff. It says, in the temple courts, he found people selling cattle. Wow. Selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. Now, as a general rule, if you're a new minister in town, right, this is not, some people might thought that I shook stuff up a little bit when I got here, but I didn't do this, right? I didn't come in on my first Sunday and make a whip and start driving people out, right? You don't normally do that. That's not good for church attendance, right? That can cause some problems, right? That's a good way to get yourself kicked out of the church. And Jesus shows up and they don't even know who he is really. And he shows up and you see the indignation in Jesus. Because this place that's supposed to be the place where God is present, this is where we meet God. There's a couple things that happen in the temple. One, we make sacrifice for sin in the temple. We bring animals and we slaughter them, and an animal dies in exchange for your sin, in exchange for you dying, an animal dies in your place. Right? And so that's what's happening. It's a sacrificial place. But it's also the place where God dwells in the Holy of Holies. God is there. That's what Israel is seeing. Israel's seeing God's house, God's presence. And the place where sacrifice and atonement is made for you and I. And so that's the Jewish institution that we see now. We're introduced to a new one. And it's also made of stone. Just like in the first part, this one's also made of stone. It's a stone temple. And watch what it says. It says, so he made this whip, and he drives them out. Verse 16, to those who sold doves, he said, get these out of here. Stop turning my father's house into a market. So the point is, this is supposed to be a place of prayer. This is supposed to be a place where this is where God dwells. And it's not. It's Costco. It's turned into a store. Like they're bringing in animals. And some of it's, you'd say, semi-legitimate. Right, in the fact that they had to use certain currency that didn't have images on it, and they needed certain animals. People were coming from a long way, and they couldn't bring like a sheep all the way there, and so but it's overboard, and they're not in the right area. They're like right in the temple area, and they're selling this, and Jesus is indignant. And Jesus is saying, wait a second. The temple, the Jewish system, the temple, this institution is bankrupt. It's bankrupt. It's empty of what it's supposed to be a house where God dwells. It's not. It's a store. It's a marketplace. It's supposed to be a place where people come to pray. It's not. It's a store. What Israel is providing to you is completely deficient. It's bankrupt. It's supposed to be the place where God dwells. But all I hear is not the hallelujahs of angels, but all I hear is a bunch of ooh. I hear animals. I don't hear the joyous sound of people worshiping God. And so he starts driving them out. The Jews then responded. Well, verse 17, the disciples remembered that it is written, zeal for your house will consume me. The Jews then responded to him, what sign can you show us to prove your authority to do this? All right, so here's basically what they're saying is, listen, if you're going to take over the temple and say that we're doing it wrong, and you're going to make a big scene here, and it says he drove everybody out. That's a big deal to do on Passover. I don't even know how he pulled that off. He's driving all these things out. How do you do that? One guy on Passover. But he drives all these people out, and then they're like, wait, who in the world do you think you are? In other words, you better be God Almighty if you're going to basically make the claims you're making. Because only God has the authority to make this kind of claim, to do what you're doing. We are Israel's teachers. We are Israel's law. We are the members of the Sanhedrin. We're the ones that run the show here. Who do you think you are? You're nobody. Unless you're God yourself. And you certainly don't look like God to me. You're sitting with a rope. Whipping people. What's that about? And so Jesus responds. You've seen the Jewish institution. What's the Jewish institution? The temple. Right? In the temple, what do we have? It's where God meets us. Okay? It's also where sacrifice is made for sin. Jesus has just declared that that is deficient. Right? It's our second institution that Jesus is declaring is deficient. It doesn't fulfill its purpose. Now all of a sudden we're going to come to our misunderstanding. They replied. Jesus answered, verse 19, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. Now, they replied. Verse 20, it has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days? But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, the disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. We have the Jewish institution of the temple. It's bankrupt. It's not the house where God's dwelling. It's a marketplace. It's not the place where you come for it's not the place where sacrifices are actually fulfilling what it's supposed to do, making you clean. Where is that? Jesus says, destroy this temple. What's the temple? He says, I am the temple. He's replacing the temple with himself. I am the temple. My body. I am the temple. This big building of stone isn't the temple. These jars aren't your means of purification. This stone temple isn't your means of the place where God dwells. Where does God live? Right here. That's his point. He's replacing it with himself. And he's going to do this over and over and over and over in this book. He's going to go from one to the next. Jewish institution, and show you that really Christianity, what we as Christ followers, we are actually the true church. Israel was the start, right? But Israel was found bankrupt. And they didn't follow what God had done in Jesus Christ. They didn't follow the Messiah. But we've picked up as the church, and now we believe, and we see that Jesus really was the fulfillment of all those things we read in the Old Testament. Some people say, I don't read the Old Testament because I'm a New Testament Christian. Well, good for you, right? The problem with being a New Testament Christian is that then you don't ever know anything about the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is full of Jesus. The Old Testament is all about Jesus. You read the Old Testament because all you see in the New Testament is it pointing back to say, that was about me, that was about me, that was about me, that was about me. The sacrifices, that was about me. The temple, that was about me. The festival, that was about me. Passover, that was about me. It was all about me. You learn about Jesus because you read your Old Testament and you see Jesus in all of it. And so Jesus is the fulfillment of our Old Testament. Let's finish up here. It says, now while he was in Jerusalem in the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing. This is the point of John. This is the point for you and I today. They saw the signs. They saw they changed water to wine. And they saw what that meant. They saw that he cleansed the temple. They saw that they're declaring declaring it bankrupt, and that he is saying, it's in me that you have a place. God is present in me. Sacrifice will happen in me. The atonement happens in me. I am the Holy of Holies. It all happens in me. It says, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. The point is, they saw this and they believed. And the question is, when you read this, the point is, you're supposed to say, yes, I believe. I believe that Jesus really is the one that the Old Testament pointing to. It is Jesus. Jesus fulfills it all. And remember that the Old Testament was all about rules. It was all about doing stuff. It was all about being good. It was all about following all this. And Jesus fulfills that all. We find in Jesus that there's nothing else necessary but faith put into Christ himself. Now, the very last sentence is a peculiar one here. It says in verse 25, or verse 24, but Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men. This is interesting. So Jesus is saying, you can trust me. You can put your faith and your trust in me, because I'm doing these signs and you can know who I am. Right? The way we know whether we can trust somebody is by what they do, right? I look at you, I see what's going on, I say, I can trust you, right? Yeah, I can trust you. Not blind trust. I can trust you because I watched you a while. I watched what you did last week. I watched how you treated other people. I've been with you for a while, now I trust you. And you can say that about Jesus. I can trust you. I know you. I've seen what you've done. I saw that you did this miracle. I saw that you changed water to wine. I saw how you treat your mama. I saw all this. I saw what you did in the temple. I can trust you. Put my faith in you. I believe in you. But the relationships are two ways, right? And so what's Jesus' response to us when he looks at us? What does he see? Does he see signs from us? Does he see us doing something that would make him put his trust in us? It says clearly no. It says clearly no. It says, but Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men. See, you don't even need to see a sign. He knows. He's God. He can see in you. He knows who you are. He knows where you are. He knows where your faith is in him now. He knows your commitment level in him now. He knows all of that. He's there. And he doesn't entrust himself to us. We entrust ourselves to him. He did not need any testimony about mankind, right? He didn't need miracles. He didn't need people showing him about their life. He didn't need you to tell him. For he knew what was in each person. He knows what's in us. Here's my call to you today. My call is that when we read the Old Testament, and I don't know how many of you read the Old Testament. Some of you read the Old Testament, some of you haven't. But what I find in the person of Jesus is that he fulfills all that was bankrupt, not only just in Israel. Like, everything is bankrupt in me. When I look around, I see bankrupt after bankrupt after bankrupt. I see one thing that's fallen through. One more thing I can't trust. One more thing that doesn't fulfill what it said was. And the whole religious system is a religious system even today. You turn on TV and you watch the religious stuff on TV, you're like, dude, really? Can I really trust that person? Right? They just asked me for like $100, and that's like all I have on my account, and they live in like a huge mansion. How can I trust that person? That's religion. Not in a religion. Jesus wasn't about religion. Jesus says you need to get rid of religion. The religion was a kind of a structure that was built up to show you and point you to me. But it's just a structure. It's just a frame. It's just empty bones. But you keep, and I was the fulfillment of that. That was supposed to point you to me. Well, why do you keep worshiping the bones? Why do you keep putting your trust in the bones? When the Messiah is here. Why do you put your trust in religion when Jesus is here with us today? And he's crazy about you. He's crazy about you. He's come because he loves us. We're going to explore a little bit more here the next couple of days. We get to meet a religious teacher next week. Israel's teacher, a guy by the name of Nicodemus. I encourage you to read in John chapter 3. I'll call it Nick at Night. Nick at night. He comes at night, so I love that. We'll do that next week, but I'm just excited to continue to kind of go through the book of John. It's a great book. Remember this as you read it. Remember these fourfold things. What's the first thing that happens? We're introduced to what? A Jewish institution, right? A Jewish institution, right? Next thing we're going to find is that Jewish institution is found to be bankrupt, empty, right? Next thing, there's going to be misunderstanding. The next thing, and it happens over and over, the next thing is going to be Jesus will fill that thing that is bankrupt, that Jewish institution, will fill it with himself. We're going to see this over and over and over. Let's do it next week. That should be fun. All right, let's pray, and then we're going to be dismissed this morning. I thank God for being here. God, I thank you for just allowing us to dive into your word and to study from the book of John, this wedding. God, we see that our purity comes from you. God, we're not clean before you because of our hands or our feet. We're clean because of what's in us. We're clean because of our heart, because you've given us new hearts, and that's what makes us clean. God, we know that we don't meet God in a building, not this building or any other, not in a temple, that we meet God in the person of Jesus. And so, God, remind us of that this week and help us to submit ourselves to you, to be your people as you are our God. Praise in Jesus' name.